conversations. Coffee with Democrats is a grassroots movement dedicated to hearing from Democrats, candidates, legislators, and friends from all political backgrounds who want great foundations. Coffee with Democrats is committed to increase Democrat voter registration and Democrat voter turnout by making voting more exciting and meaningful. And now here's your host of Coffee with Democrats, Kevin Dawson.
That always takes me back. So good morning, everybody. Steve, I saw you had your hand up there, so you want to go ahead?
No, I'm good, Kevin. You just take it and run with it. Good morning, Madison, and I'll just sit back and let you take the lead, of course.
Well, it's great to be here today. We are at Harvey's Bakery and Kitchen, and we're at the corner of 13th and Harvey in northwest Oklahoma City, basically central Oklahoma City. And we're here with Madison Horn. Again, if everybody remembers, Madison Horn was a candidate for U.S. Senate. She did an outstanding job representing the Democratic Party. We're really excited to have Madison with us. Thank you so much. It's great to be with you. And I will say this, it's great to be with a really good friend. So thank you so much for being with us today.
That's so kind. I'm thrilled to be reconnected here today. I know we spent a lot of time on the trail, especially in Norman. You're such a great representative, so delighted to be here.
Well, we talked just a little bit earlier that we have grown Coffee with Democrats now. It's in 6 different states: Oklahoma, Arkansas, Georgia, Connecticut, Florida, and Ohio. So
wow.
We are really excited to be growing and having Coffee with Democrats expanding into other states. We can't thank you enough for being here with us today. I think there's a lot for us to catch up on. So it's been sometime about mid-November, the last time that we spoke, and there's been a lot that's gone on since then. If to say that I don't follow you, or if I say I do follow you, it's probably an understatement because I follow everything you do. So it's great to actually be here in person. So let's go ahead and get caught up after the election in November. There's a little bit of downtime, a little time to take a breath. So that was a great opportunity. But you didn't take a breath for very long, because the next thing I saw, you were going on a trip to Israel. And that was for a seminar for cybersecurity, I thought.
Yeah, so you pick up a good point. I don't sit still long. I'm used to moving very quickly, going very quick. I've got a lot of energy, a lot of passion to make a difference here in Oklahoma.
Sure.
So, after the campaign, the momentum, I wanted to continue that going, continue the excitement, because it's so important for, I think, candidates and leaders that build a base here in the state of Oklahoma to really continue that. I think that it helps build the Democratic movement across the state as a whole. But yes, absolutely. So I sit on a board actually with the Israeli embassy in DC, and part of that is helping with economic trade and development here in the US. And so I went as part of a delegation to Israel for a conference to talk about all things cybersecurity, met with the Ministry of Defense there, and had a wonderful time, and really hoping to help bring some of the innovation that is happening in Israel to Oklahoma, not just for our workforce, but to help bolster the economic development here in the state as well.
So I have a little story to tell.
Okay.
In my previous job, I was responsible for public safety with a major railroad, and I was in Chicago, Illinois. In our offices in Chicago, we had the floor right above the Israeli consulate for Chicago.
Oh.
And the Israelis, after 1972, the Olympics, they don't take no chances no more. So whenever their consulates and their families are abroad, they are completely protected. I got on the elevator to go down to the ground floor to exit the building. We go down one floor, the door opens up. I'm looking at 3 big guys, and they got briefcases, but they got their hands stuck inside their briefcases. And they come on, and the typical what the norm is. You get into an elevator, you turn around, and you face the door. you never face the back of the elevator. They put me right in the corner and looked at me the whole time. But I did see one of the most amazing ladies get on. She was very small, but she was dressed to the nines with diamonds and pearls.
Wow.
And she got on and they were protecting her the whole time on that elevator. So that's my story about being that close to one of the consulates and consulate families. So that was a very humbling experience, but at the same time, it was an eye-opening experience for me. So you went to Israel, and you were in Israel when there was some stuff go down. Can you talk a little bit about where you were at? And
Sure.
in relationship to where that happened.
Sure. So where I was staying, I was actually in Tel Aviv, where a lot of the, we'll say, protesting was happening.
Sure.
And let me be very clear, majority of the population of Israel is not in agreement with what is happening with Bibi and the government and the, I'm trying to say this politely, the way that he is working against the judicial system in Israel.
And you're talking about Netanyahu.
That's right, Bibi, either or. So, seeing, 600,000 people protesting in the streets, it really reminds me of what's happening here right now in the U.S.
Sure.
And it's an unfortunate reality, but it is this level of fascism that is growing across the world. And I think that we have to kind of take a step back from just us in the US and see how this is growing across the world, and how we as the US really are a beacon for different types of laws and policies, and understand our role. And so when we talk about, whether that be Russia and Ukraine, or we talk about a relationship with China, or we talk about the relationships directly with Israel, we do have to remember that we are supposed to be this beacon of democracy. And so it's very, very important that we take a hard look at ourselves so that we can continue to be that image.
While you were gone, we had one of the most wonderful experiences with a very good friend of yours. Mary and her husband came down, and we had a barbecue. And we missed you for that opportunity. We need to plan on having another barbecue pretty soon so that we can involve you and Frank, the rest of your family. That was such a wonderful experience for us. But we do want to let you know you were missed.
Oh,
And, I know on behalf of Steve, we were really looking forward to the opportunity to talk to you. But at the same time, we understood that you were in Israel at the time, and we were praying for you and for having a safe return. Because I think the day we were there having our barbecue was the day that there was some trouble that took place, and some explosions. So it was very, very disturbing. And I say disturbing, but it brings solemn to, when you go to Israel, you are going to a place that has been under strife since the formation of the country back in the 1950s. And it continues to be under strife. And like you said, there is some political issues that are going on that exacerbate some of that, that the people of Israel need to let their voices be heard. That was such a weird dichotomy of things that happened in Israel, where the Netanyahu was deposed, what was about a year and a half ago. And in just a shorter period of time, that government was again ousted, and then Netanyahu was brought back on.
Right.
And I think it's really odd that the people of Israel, how their election systems work, how that actually happened, because I thought the man was gone. I did not see how he was ever going to get back into power again. And here again, he ushered himself back in.
Yeah, I don't think the people of Israel thought that he was going to come back either. Though, the powers to be, there are levels of corruption within their government system right now. And you can see the fractions that are starting to break off because he has taken steps too far.
But that brings a point to the United States, that people in the United States really need to stay focused on their vote and their right to vote, because if we allow corruption to rule in the United States the way that it took over and allowed Netanyahu to come back, we could be looking at a twice impeached person, ex-president, who is now under indictment to actually come back and rule the United States and actually do some very, very deep harm to our constitutional democratic republic. And we need to stay focused on people need to vote. We always talk about during election time, get out the vote, GOTV. GOTV is such an important aspect, but in I believe in Oklahoma in our election numbers were way down, like in the 25-26% range of the total number of Democrats who participated in the election. And we saw it during the state question for recreational marijuana, like 13%, 17%, something like that, of Democrats actually got involved. And by not participating in our election, we're acquiescing and surrendering to people that are extremists.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start with that, Kevin. Let's just start with the very basic. Yes, we have to empower people to vote. But I think that is, what does that mean? And I'm a solution orientated person when I think, okay, people aren't voting. Okay, well, what's the issue? We don't have a culture of voting. We have this culture of understanding that, well, my vote doesn't matter. I cannot tell you how many times I heard it in the campaign. It made me ill. Even if your vote, perhaps the person you vote for loses, it still matters. It absolutely still matters. And so I think what we have to do is, it's almost like making voting cool. Like, how do we make a culture around people? If you don't vote, then you're out of the loop, right? And that is not the norm. Right. And, I did live in Washington, D.C. for work, and it was so interesting seeing this stark contrast between the culture when it was election cycle, and we're talking about D.C., whereas the apparatus of, our government. Right. But, I think it's a good contrast. Let's see the direct opposite to the other opposite. And in D.C., everything is about the election cycle. Restaurants come out and have signs posted everywhere. You can't avoid it. Right. And so I want to see here.
I'm going to ask Steve. Steve, can you hear us on your connection?
Yeah, here it's great. Hi, Madison.
Uh-oh.
Maybe Madison can't hear me.
It appears we've lost our connection. So,
well, I tell you what, Kevin.
Can you check to see if you're good on your phone?
Kevin, can you hear me okay?
So let me ask you a question. For those who are listening in, can you hear us? Give us a thumbs up, please. All right, okay. Debbie says you can hear us again. Thanks, Debbie.
Okay. So who can hear me? Can you hear me, Kevin or Madison? Okay. Well, Madison cannot. So as go. So copy with Kratz, Ohio, Arkansas.
Hey, yeah, sorry we're having difficulties. I just have really a quick question for Madison. I was briefly listening to you guys talk, and I love the notion of making voting cool. I'm 25 years old, and I'm running for a state house district in Georgia, which is where I am. I'm about an hour west of Savannah. So I'm surrounded by kids under the age of 30. We have a huge college campus right here. I live across the street from it, etc. We have a huge Young Democrats chapter here. And I'm wondering, my question is, how much of this really do we think is part of age difference? Because I know that our voter age of 55 are always out at the polls. But I've been working for the past year, really trying to get our young people out to the polls. And we've seen with Tennessee and with Gen Zers across the country, especially in our 22 midterms, that they really came out and supported us. And I've been trying to ride that wave down here. But really, how much of this work should we be putting on our young people? Because I'll be the first one to stand up in the room and say, we haven't been doing the most. Maybe last year we came out in historical numbers, but that needs to be a consistent pattern that we see. So how much do you think it really has to do with age?
Sure. Well, first off, thank you so much for coming on. And I hope you absolutely kick butt on your race. Anything that we can do, please, please, please reach out. You know, to answer your question, I'll be honest with you, like, I don't know if the age disparity, I'm not 25, I'm 32, and I was really hoping to energize this younger population and was feeling hopeful, and maybe that's whimsical, and a little bit living on a dream. But, you know, I was frustrated. And I think a lot of individuals my age and younger people who hear that, you know, their friends don't vote, they're like, but why? I think it's a number of different things versus age disparity. You know, a lot of the generation that you know, is coming to voting age lived through years of Obama and Bill Clinton. And I'm not saying that these were great presidents, but it was a different time where our parents grew up in a time where voting was very much talked about. There were wars going on. And so it puts civil duty kind of at the forefront. Whereas I don't think that we talk about civil responsibility anymore. And so I think that's a huge part of it. So I think there's an education issue. I think that there is this lack of understanding of, you know, what voting means, and how to do it. It can be intimidating. And then there's the lack of excuse, but it is the reality. You know, of 18 and 25, you're just trying to figure out what the hell life is. You're going through so many transitions and being like, oh my God, I've got to pay electric bill. I've got to pay an apartment. I've got to go vote. You know, there's just overwhelmed with so many new things that you're trying to kind of absorb. And I'm not trying to come from a place of privilege, but that is the reality of this transformational time in young people's lives. So I think it's a number of things, but I think that what we can do first and foremost is just continue to engage with younger voters, try to make voting cool, part of the culture, and then ensure that we're talking about it in an education perspective as well.
So one of the things that I think could help us is we've lost focus as generations come about. I remember my generation in the 1960s, we were very active as young adults. We were very active in the early 70s. And we were activists to the point where, you know, we were considered the hippie group that,
Sure.
you know, whatever, you know, that we were kind of downcast because we wanted to get involved in politics because we had a cause. We were fighting the Vietnam War. We were fighting racism. We wanted to have equal rights amendment and more laws in place to help people have equal rights. So that was the cause that brought us about. And then you see people go through the Reagan time frame and just kind of get discouraged and not get involved. And then, but you're seeing now, all over the United States, you're seeing a movement. I thought we would have seen a bigger movement last year with women's rights, but I think the walkouts that we're seeing right now may be that one catalyst that it's, you know, maybe it's going to be a dual cause. Women's rights, gun control are going to be the two issues that inspire people to get out and vote. I mean, go ahead.
No, I think that you're correct. It's social change takes longer than we anticipate. It's that, oh my God, what's happening? Kind of that shock effect. And then it's kind of trying to storm and norm and make sense of it. And then it's like, oh crap, I've got to do something. But I'm going to pause and see some questions. So go ahead.
I'm going to have Madeline, you have a follow-up question. So I want you to go ahead and go first. And maybe we'll go to you next.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I think I agree wholeheartedly. I think that kids nowadays do not get the education. We don't teach them civics in high school anymore. I know that for a fact. And even, you know, at my age, I know that I did get a civics lesson in high school. I had one class that was on civics and we did the basics. But after having the experience of being a candidate on the other side, I now retrospectively understand how little we actually teach our kids in school about civics. And when we, on your point of bringing up women's rights, yes, I think that ordinarily we would think that, oh yeah, of course, stripping women of their rights, that would get them to go to the polls. But one thing I will say, especially in my area, that I see that I can admit that I have not been as vocal on is that white Republican women do not care about not having access to abortion. I cannot tell you how many conversations I have had with white women my age on my college campus that are happy about not having access to abortion. In my district, we do not have a single clinic in this district that will give you an abortion. You have to go to Savannah to the Planned Parenthood to even have that opportunity.
Wow.
So that is one thing that I can openly admit as someone, I'm a white woman, and I know that I have not been as vocal about that, especially in this area, that women need to get on need to step up to the plate and understand that while your religiosity may not tell you that, abortion is something that you have option for, or, that is acceptable in your life, but that doesn't mean that we need to be stripping the rights of every single woman in this state. It just doesn't make any sense. So that is one thing that when it comes to women's rights and young people, white young women need to get on the game plan. That's the only last thing I'll say. But thank you guys for letting me speak.
Absolutely. I love the ad here. So you're saying that we just need to get angry. We need to get it straight up, just pissed off and engaged.
Maze has a question, and Maze, could you go ahead?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to convert my question for the moment. I'll circle back with that, but I'm going to comment on what was said, piggyback on what Madison said. I think there's a problem with it in that it's true for her experience, where she's actually witnessed for herself. But what I want to add to the conversation is how we are failing to intersect how everyone is affected by what is going on in terms of women not having proper care. It's not just that she can't have a medical procedure that should be between her and her clinicians. It is that the government is now inserting themselves in such a way that it is making it hazardous for every last person in the community to get health care. Okay, and that's that's something we can't put off on kids to figure out. It is the example of the adults, and also I will also put fingerprints on the fourth estate. We are being failed. We are being failed consistently and rigidly, and we must push back on that.
Yeah.
I'll circle back with my next question. Thank you.
We're going to let Madison have a chance to respond here.
Yeah, and the only thing that I wanted to say is, one, I love the responsibility that you're placing on all women to take a stand and understand the impact, and us to have that intersection of what is the downstream impacts than just the restriction to reproductive health care. I will say though, in Madeline, obviously Savannah or Georgia and Oklahoma are very different. During my campaign, I actually saw quite the opposite. I saw Republican women really coming out and being very vocal. There was 2 new organizations that were stood up. They were stood up by Republican women, but set out to be non-partisan. So they actually did really great here in Oklahoma, but I think that it was too late. So I'm really hoping that they continue their momentum into 2024.
So,
Coffee with Democrats Ohio's got a question.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? Good. Just want to mention 2 things. So here in Ohio, we started a referendum process for abortion, and the Republicans have gotten very smart to this. So they're actually trying to change the rules on us and make it that we need a super majority in order to get a referendum. So we actually, instead of 50%, we're going to be needing 60%. They're in the process of getting it passed. So we have the votes going on. They're doing the collection. They had drive-up signing going around in counties to get the votes, to get the signatures needed. But then this came out in regards to that. The other thing I do want to say is with Gen Z, the of candidates that we had in Ohio, for me, actually, it gave me goosebumps, because the thing that everyone was talking about was the lack of civics in schools. Just shows you that the youth of America is screaming for change. They want to be part of the process. And this is not what they're getting taught. So they're deciding to learn on their own because they're not happy with what's going on in their America. So they're tired of getting their friends.
I'm glad you said that.
Killed.
I'm glad you spoke up and said about that,
Yeah.
Ray, because really, when you're bringing up a point about people having to teach themselves civics, kind of takes me back to the 1960s and 70s, where we were teaching ourselves the same civics lessons all over again. And we were becoming the activists that were going out and holding up signs and walking down the middle of the street. And again, the unfortunate side of what we were doing in the 1960s was the riots. But again, riots is the voice of the unheard. But, there was a lot of activity that took place in the 1960s. I mean, we can point fingers to Kent State, and we can point fingers to many other very negative things that took place. But out of those was a very positive movement about civil rights. And there's been a consistent and constant attack on those civil rights ever since the 1960s and 70s. And we're seeing a degradation of that now, with most states having GOP-controlled legislatures and having supermajorities, and they're doing everything they can to take away a lot of those things that or say programs that people had in place to affirm that we had equal rights. And we're seeing it with the LGBTQ community. They're attacking that community very hard as well. And so we have, we have multiple reasons for us to get people involved, and we have multiple causes for people to get behind: gun control, women's rights, LGBTQ. There's another one I can't think of right now, but we really need to give people that option. And just like what Madison said, and Madeline spoke to, it's time to get mad as hell. And that's going to be our theme song at the end of this. Is we're going to have the theme song that Dee Snyder is mentioning. We're not going to take it anymore. So so thanks for saying that, Ray. I appreciate you doing that.
No problem. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Let's talk a little bit more. We're talking about some of the issues that took place with Madison, but talk just a little bit about some downtime. Hopefully you had some downtime to enjoy, besides just constantly being on the run and constantly going and moving with the campaign, because you were in every single county for the entire year, twice?
That's right.
In running up to the election. So you got to meet thousands and thousands of people in Oklahoma. But at some point, you got to take a breath. You went to Mexico City. Tell us a little bit about what you did down there.
Oh my goodness. Well, first off, seriously, I cannot stress how much fun, how much excitement the campaign was. So I don't want anyone to think, oh man, it's time to prop your feet up. No. Equally as charged. It's time. It is Oklahoma's time to make a difference. And we're going to continue riding the wave. And I will echo that until the cows come home. We'll use an Oklahoma saying here. But Mexico City was purely just an amazing opportunity for me to hang out with my partner's family and just have some downtime relaxation, some good food. We went to a couple of different anthropology museums. And I think that I sat on a couch and had a couple glasses of wine watching Emily in Paris. Mary is on the call. Her and I had a great time. I love fashion. That's my guilty pleasure, guys. So, it was just a relaxing time. It was not a work experience.
So You come back and then you're very active, gone to a couple of seminars with cybersecurity, and it seems like you're starting to hit your stride with some of these critical issues with technology, and that seems to be your strong suit. And so let's talk a little bit about your take on TikTok. What's going on within TikTok, and should we be afraid of TikTok, and should we be running away from it as fast as we can, or should we embrace it?
So, just giving the audience a little bit of background, kind of something I didn't realize during the campaign, because you're just so focused, is that most people didn't realize that I had a background in cybersecurity. So I've been working in the field of cybersecurity for almost 15 years with a hyper focus on critical infrastructure. And people think critical infrastructure, they're just like electric. No. That's nuclear, that's oil and gas, that is renewables, water, chemical. It's kind of all across the gamut. And so a lot of the conferences that I've been attending have been focused around critical infrastructure and helping influence policy to ensure that we are protecting U.S. critical infrastructure. But as it relates to TikTok specifically, let me tell a little story, I guess, and I'll try to keep it short. So part of my career, then I led an ethical hacking team. And you're constantly reviewing alerts of attacks coming into organizations. And as an ethical hacking team, what you try to do is you mimic those alerts coming from foreign adversaries. Well, in learning techniques and understanding different nation states, then an organization called Mandiant actually discovered that the Chinese had been infiltrating US businesses, every single Fortune 100, Fortune 500 business, and we don't know how long they had been there. But the Chinese government has become specialist experts in stealing American IP. So when we talk about bringing together, TikTok, banning TikTok is not the answer. TikTok didn't exist 10 years ago.
Right.
And so banning TikTok is like putting a Band-Aid on a festering wound. And so to me, it's not about banning TikTok. I don't think that the US needs to act or get started in banning anything. I think that it's against the founding principles of the United States. So what we need to do is actually put together a strategic policy around data privacy and personal privacy, and what businesses can do with consumer data.
Right.
That is the problem that we're talking about. And then what about spyware? Spyware meaning, for people to be able to surveillance others. What are the protective techniques and preventative techniques that we can put into place as businesses, as individuals, which, I think the bedrock of every conversation that we all have is education. And so I kind of talked about three solutions there: an overarching data privacy policy, preventative measures as it relates to nation states and protecting consumers, and then the third, education for individuals to understand what their data, the value around that data, and what it can potentially lead to.
So we have a couple of questions that have popped up. Madeline, I'll get to you in just a second. Maze, you've had your hand up for a little bit. If you can, keep your question brief here so that we can continue to move on. Let's hit as many topics as we can during this discussion.
Yes, quickly, here in Arkansas, where I live at, they're trying to implement something called the Social Media Safety Act. It's SB 396 if you want to look it up. The thing about this is they want all new users of social media of companies to verify their age, and this would require social media companies to verify new users' age before allowing them to make an account. Okay, I don't see a problem with that, but I do see an issue, whereas we already do that. I feel like this is data collecting on the part of
Big government.
the states,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think you're right, because what they would be requiring is name, age, area, basic information to locate an individual and track a person. How would you go about advising somebody in our state to defend ourselves against this such
Sure.
thing?
So I want to make a very clear delineation. So SB 396, then, new users. I mean, you said it yourself, Maze. Verifying age, verifying, male, female, other. The list continues, and date of birth is something social media platforms, already do. Because there is a restriction on being able to collect data on minors and ensuring that the platform is, air quotes, supposed to be for and so this already happens, and you already said, this bill doesn't really help that. You bring in the government aspect and talking about the government collecting data. I think what we need to make very, very clear is that just because a social media company has it and the government says the social media company has to ask for this information does not mean that the US government is collecting this data. And I also want to be very clear, they already have this data. When you get your social security card, when you go to, if you apply for Medicare, Medicaid, they already have this information. So we're talking about things that I hate to say are irrelevant, but we've already given that data away because we do not understand how much of our personal data is already out there. And so it is about protecting the data that is already there and then educating people on what other information that we should not be sharing.
Madeline, you have a question.
Yeah, it's kind of a question statement. Well, we're talking about like who owns people's personal data, the government versus private companies. Obviously, we know that the government is going to have all kinds of information on us when we do things, like social security cards, etc., Medicaid, blah, blah, blah. My biggest thing is private companies being able to collect data and then being able to buy and sell it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I have a huge issue with. And I guess really my question is, and hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. My second point is also we have a whole nother population in America, like our geriatric population, people over the age of 65 that know absolutely nothing about cybersecurity seriously. Because I will say that in school, I studied gerontology. I spent hundreds of hours in long-term care facilities, talking with older adults, talking with people in hospice, and I got to know that community very well. And they don't want anything to do with that. They don't want to do anything with cybersecurity. They don't want anything to do with social media. They just want to get their news. They want to live their lives. They want to not be scammed when people call their house phone. So if we could pass a perfect piece of legislation, let's say, that covers that entire gamut, that not only protects people that use and know social media and are aware of what they do on the internet, but also people who don't use any of that don't want anything to do with social media or having their data anywhere, and just, what are we doing to protect those people? And I feel like we don't do a whole lot to protect any of those people right now as far as data security goes.
Yeah, Madeline, and I agree with the last part of your statement. Not saying I disagree with the other parts, but really honing in on that last statement that we're not doing enough to protect consumer data. I agree with you, and I think this is because of the fact that we have a group of legislators that do not understand technology, and so we're trying to retroactively create policy for technology and this modern era. So we are so far behind in this specific area. But let's be a little bit more specific. Let's remove date of birth, first name, last name. Let's talk about health data in general, right? We had HIPAA come out that is supposed to protect health data, but to the conversation and the concern I think that you raised is the private collection of data and then selling of that healthcare data. This is where there needs to be some type of notification process in place that says, hey, Madison, I'm selling, Kevin's data to Madeline. Do you accept this? Yes or no? And there needs to be some type of communication cycle, but we also have to understand as the users of technology, when we hit okay, that we're accepting something. Well, what are we accepting? Did I just say that I'm okay with, Kevin sending my data to whoever he wants. And this is the end user really understanding what they are doing. And I'm not trying to put all responsibility, but there is a shared responsibility here for an individual to take ownership and understand the downstream impacts of them, selling whatever it may be.
But again, there could be a mechanism in place that is missing right now that should be put out there. But I do have to back up just a little bit.
Sure.
And I'm going to say this just out of fun, Madeline, because you're a friend, I can say this. Madison, would you take the dagger out of my heart? She just broke my heart when she talked about geriatric.
Well, no, and I should say that that probably sounded very ageist, and I did not way, and I apologize. But I'm talking like, y'all, I have a grandfather who's years old. I'm thinking about people like him. I'm thinking about people like my grandfather that are not on social media. He doesn't have a Facebook, and he lives his life. He lives alone. He's the healthiest man I know, and he's my superhero. But I know that he probably gets hundreds of calls a week about, different things that people are scamming him with and things like that. And like, what are we doing to protect people like him from stuff like that? Is that, I just, it worries me really as a granddaughter.
No. And again, we were just, because you're a friend, I thought it was okay to have a little jest time with you on that. We just, said that in jest and don't take it seriously, because what you brought up is absolutely critical. Those of us, as we get older, we have to understand that there is a real effort, not only on the internet, but through mailings and through telephone calls to try to scam people. And there should be, mechanisms that are put in place. And in reality, I think there should be a law, or maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but I think there should be laws put in place that would make those types of activities illegal within the United States. And there should be also mechanisms, firewalls put up that would make it harder for people from outside of the United States to have access to our people like myself, the geriatric. I'm laughing here, Madeline. I'm at your expense. I apologize, but it's true, and it's something that we have to be concerned about.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't want to get down in the weeds into like a really deep, like technical conversation on this, though, it is illegal to make scam calls. That's why they're called scams. But we do live in a global society where corporations require information from individuals across the pond, because majority of us not necessarily work directly with, but interact with a global organization more often than we even realize. And so that's why I do believe that there has to be cooperation at the federal government level to ensure that there are data privacy laws that are put into place at a global scale in collaboration with different countries and organizations, and actually put into place what are the consequences of, let's say, selling off data that wasn't approved by the end user prior to a number of things. And I'm just being very specific here. And we are retroactively doing this, and that's the unfortunate reality.
Sure. So yesterday, we saw, when I first read the article, or excuse me, the headline, I didn't read the article, but I saw the headline where we had Senator Langford really promoting this idea of making VPNs illegal. And in reality, there's more specifics down to that. But the way that the headline wrote, it was, let's just put it this way, it's not very flattering for him to have his name put aside something that really had nothing to do with the United States, but it had more to do with what was going on in foreign countries. So you want to speak about that article that came out yesterday? Yes.
Sure. And I want to make it clear, I haven't read the article in entirety. I've seen it. I have a very high level understanding of what that article says and the bill that he's put forward. But this is, we're having tech talk, guys.
Yes.
That bill specifically obviously is in relation to TikTok. The idea is that if you're a US citizen, use a VPN after TikTok has been banned to access TikTok, then there could be retaliation. And I don't want to say retaliation. There could be some type of consequences, whether that be a fine, jail time, something. I personally, again, we operate within the free market. We should not get in the habit of banning things. We are not an authoritarian government. A VPN, purely what that is just to help create a secure connection. And so the idea for us to ban secure connections for communications or for privacy for organizations, for own personal privacy, I think steps over a line of potential monitoring of individuals. I mean, I just don't even know how to technically monitor if you were using a Chinese or Russian VPN. I think that it crosses some lines personally.
So let's change directions here just a little bit, change topics. Let's talk a little bit about Trump indictment. That is, I think, something that all of us have looked at. For most of us, we were very cognizant about what was going on in 2015 run up to the election in 2016. We knew that there was a problem. We knew that there was significant issues, but we didn't realize there was this much of an issue. So you want to talk a little bit about this indictment and what your understanding is and give your take on this indictment for former President Trump.
We really did take a far right.
Yeah, we did.
Not even pun intended there.
And it was by design too. We've been talking so much about tech, we need to go ahead and change.
Sure. So, putting all personal feelings aside about, him as an individual, morals, ethics, etc., and also as not an attorney, I've listened to a number of experts who are lawyers kind of identifying and looking at the case. And kind of what I continuously hear is, one, what a circumstance for Trump to, we'll say, air quotes, get caught,
right.
With this scenario of him having a hush payment to an adult entertainer. It's almost cliche of his personality and who he is as a figure. And so I find a lot of irony in that,
right.
Because he is kind of this mob figure in New York. I mean, I guess you are kind of the product of your environment. But what I continue to hear is that, the action of the hush money and having Cohen pay that and pay it through through the campaign, hide it as legal fees, then that really is a misdemeanor. It's not even a felony. And so there's questions of how is this going to be turned into a felony? The felony has to stick because of precedent meaning that, he hasn't lived in New York in 5 years. And so with a misdemeanor, then it's within 2. With the felony, it covers anything from 5 years. So, obviously we understand what's included in the indictment from Bragg's, but there's more to come.
Sure.
And so what people are kind of saying, legal experts, when I say the people, then they're kind of wondering how they're going to tie this connection to a felony, and obviously something that is federal election laws and not necessarily something in New York. And there's a lot of question and speculation, though I think that we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there is a number of other cases that are being pursued, obviously in Georgia, and then also with the documents in Mar-a-Lago. And what I am hearing is the Mar-a-Lago case actually seems to be more of that smoking gun, not because of the fact that he took the documentation, but because of the fact that there is a direct email conversation, some type of documented conversation where he was telling his lawyers of, hey, keep this documentation so that it cannot be removed from my home. And that is in itself, there's a legal term that I am looking for, but it is basically getting in the way of actual civic duty.
Sure. Well, and it's my understanding also with the documentation in the New York case, making it a felony, was that these actions were to cover up and to also cause for additional crimes to exist.
Mm-hmm.
So there seems to be additional information there, and as we're all going to be inundated with information, the news media is going to just pour all of this legal information into our brains over the next few weeks and months. we're going to become experts on the misdemeanor versus felony and all that stuff that's going to be taking place. But you did bring up a good point about, and what my question was leading up to is, do you see a point where this is just, one stick being pulled out of the dam that's, going to cause somebody to say, all right, I'm going to pull another stick out of the dam that's going to eventually make the dam collapse and bust. And we're just going to see a flood of additional cases that come out against him.
So, I mean, I don't want to overstep what I know and don't know.
Sure.
What I can say, I do trust the United States judicial system, and I believe that they will investigate appropriately. What I want to continue to say is, and I hope that we can remove politics from justice, because they are two very, very different things. And so we need to kind of step back. And, this is where I've been very, very careful about having conversation about the indictment or putting anything out, because as a former U.S. Senate candidate, then I do represent a party, and I want to ensure that I'm not trying to make this a political issue and continue to kind of flame this fuel.
So I think there is, there's a certain number of people that are listening on here. We're going to change directions again. We're going to come back to Madison Horn. There's going to be some people that want to ask the question. Hear it from you. What are your
If you don't, Madison, can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Hi, Steve.
Okay, this is Steve. So
The actual attorney.
something else happened on Tuesday, and that was the entry of Finland into NATO. And we'd just like your general comments and perspectives about the war in Ukraine and the entry of Finland into NATO at this juncture.
Sure. So I don't think people realize how big of a deal Finland becoming a part of NATO is. So, I mean, it shares more of a border with Russia than any other country, which was kind of surprising to me. I will say this from a place of ignorance. I knew that it shared a border, but I literally had to pull out the map after I saw the announcement just to really realize how much of a border that they shared. But since World War II, they've been very, very, very neutral. Even during World War II, they were a very neutral country. And so I think for them to finally join NATO really shows, one, where we have gotten where this war has gotten, and the actual threat that Russia-Ukraine war actually has on a global scale, and what the success of Russia and Ukraine could actually lead to. And so I think NATO accepting and welcoming Finland is phenomenal, especially for the region. I think that it's great for us to show this level of solidarity as a global community. And so I'm very excited about it. Now, as far as the war itself, it's barbaric, it's brutal. And I say these things because we haven't experienced war with social media. We haven't experienced such two civilized societies combating each other with modern technology. And when I say modern technology, I mean modern weapons. And so the destruction that is happening there, I think that we really need to take a step back and look at what this means from a global devastation perspective, and how much we need to avoid war and continue to come to the table and hope to find peace and ways to create sanctions to avoid war altogether.
Yeah, I got that sentiment that you just said. It is such a, we're seeing it from a social media standpoint. We're seeing the Russian propaganda. We're seeing information from Ukraine coming out, and just unfathomable that 150,000 Russians are just being escorted to their deaths because of legal aid and his I guess focus to try to bring back the old Soviet Union.
And that's ultimately his goal, but we also have to be watching other different power plays that are happening and alliances that are happening. I mean, China is, very is not hiding the fact that they support Russia. And obviously, China is not a direct ally, but they're also not an enemy, not at least as it relates to them being defined as an enemy. But they, I guess I'm going to say it, they are. And we have to be very mindful of that in the way that we interact with China.
Right.
And we also need to create a focus on the relationships and the investments that they're making in Africa, which is just overwhelming. And so there's alliances and power shifts that are happening. And I don't mean to make this a foreign policy lesson, but we can't just continue to hone in on Russia, Ukraine. We have to kind of watch the other power dynamics that are happening to ensure that we are appropriately prepared as a country as well.
So let's get back to that.
Okay.
We'll just have a couple of minutes left. Let's talk about where you are and where you want to go. What do you have, in your calendar? You don't need the calendar. What is in your focus where you want to go in the next few years?
Sure. I am an A-type personality. For the longest time, then I felt like I needed to know my plan for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, but I don't think that that's realistic. I think that we only have control within the next 3 to 6 months.
Sure.
Tomorrow I'll be speaking at a cybersecurity conference here in Tulsa, or not here in Tulsa, but in Tulsa at B-Sides. The title of the talk is "Can I Punch You in the Face?" So I hope you attend. It will be kind of comical and fun. But the question that you're alluding to is, and am I going to run for office again? Do I intend to stay engaged? My mission hasn't changed. I am still here to fight for Oklahomans, to ensure that they have equal opportunity, that we are creating opportunities for the workforce, et cetera, et cetera. And people will continue to see me here on the ground. I would like to be an elected official for the state. I believe that I come from a place that isn't being driven by ego, but true love and compassion for people. I don't know when that opportunity is going to arise to ensure that path, but I'm not going anywhere.
So I'm glad you said that, because the reason for asking that question, from my standpoint, from Steve, and the other groups within Coffee with Democrats, we want you to know that we support you.
Thank you.
And we're behind you 100%. We will do everything we can to help energize whatever we need to do. The people that need to be energized, we will help whatever we can. So we want to, again, back up just a little bit. We want to thank you for what you did. You ran an outstanding campaign. You really kind of showed the crowd of candidates how to run a campaign. And even though it may not have been the outcome that you wanted, but I'm going to say you ran a successful campaign. And that was I think the goal of any person is to have a very successful campaign at the end of it, no matter what the outcome is, to be proud of what you did. We're very proud of you and what you did.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maze, I apologize. We're not going to be able to get to your question. We're going to be wrapping this up. We've got 2 minutes left here. So this week we've had a fantastic, wonderful conversation with Madison. We want to thank her for coming and being with us. You've been a champion the entire time, and we love you. And we're going to continue to do what we can to show you our support. Next week, we're going to be at a very good place with Coffee with Democrats. We need to, everybody who's on here, please share. We're going to be posting later on tomorrow. We're going to be sharing who our next guest is. Our next guest next week, next Thursday, is Adrian Fontes. Adrian Fontes is the Secretary of State for the state of Arizona. And if you have anything to do with politics, you understand how important Arizona was for the outcome of the 2020 and the 2022 election cycle. Adrian Fontes was at the tip of the spear with his activities for Arizona to help make sure that they had accurate counting and accountability for all of the ballots that were put in place. He's going to talk about what he did during that election. We're going to push him to kind of give us more history about that. But one of the things that we are very interested in talking with Adrian about is his advocacy for 2A change. That's the Second Amendment change of philosophy, not to change the 2A, but change the philosophy about it. And the fact that we should be eliminating guns of war from our streets. Guns that should be in battlefields should not be on the streets in America. So we're going to push that effort and talk to him next Thursday. So for everybody who is on here, please come back next Thursday and join us. And with that being said, Ray, do you have, I'm not going to take it anymore. I think we'd like to close with that one. Let's just get your blood pumping right there.
I'm excited.
I love it. I'm so glad that Lee Snyder and Twisted Sister has really taken it upon themselves to support. So, everybody, thank you for joining us today. We're talking with Democrats. Please come back next week. And until we talk next week, please be safe. Thank you, everybody, for joining in.